Hi, friends. Thanks for joining me today for the live show. Got a fantastic guest and conversation for you today. Here's the topic: born gay, gay Christian. Not so fast, says my guest. A new study shows that an astonishing 72% of same sex attracted people who want help and commit a year toward freedom from their sexual brokenness and addiction find it. An unprecedented survey conducted by Stephen Black and his colleagues included an initial 1,200 client files compiled over the last 25 years. The 185 respondents, main focus group of responders, came to First Stone Ministries as sexually broken people. According to Black, there are tens of thousands of people across the United States who have permanently left a homosexual or gay identity. The author of Freedom Realized, Finding Freedom from Homosexuality, Black knows the struggle firsthand since his own freedom 35 years ago. He has been an outspoken advocate for helping those with similar sexual struggles. No one is born gay, he matter of factly states. God's grace does not keep people in bondage to sin. God's grace is transformational. He loves us too much to leave us the bondage of sin. Stephen Black is the executive director of First Stone Ministries, ordained with the International Ministerial Fellowship. He's an author and speaker on issues of sexual and relational brokenness. He's one of the founders of the Restored Hope Network and serves as chairman of the board, which supplies a biblically orthodox network of ministries to the sexually broken. Drawn into homosexuality as a victim of a childhood sexual abuse, he lived a gay identified life for 8 years before Christ set him free in 1983. He and his wife of 32 years live in the Oklahoma City area with 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren. What a story of freedom and God's grace. Stephen, thank you for joining me today for the live show.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's a privilege for me to chat with you. I um, came into contact with you through a mutual friend, and he suggested that you'd be a perfect guest, and I agreed immediately. You have worked, Stephen, in pastoral care, as I mentioned briefly in the bio, but you've worked in pastoral care ministry for over 25 years, especially to those in sexual brokenness. I'll just say it that way, in the homosexual life. As we start today, some of those that have joined us for the show may not be familiar with you, First Stone Ministries, and your work. So, how about if you share just a little bit about yourself and how Christ set you free?
Amen. I would love to. Thank you for the honor. Well, my story begins in 1983 as far as a total surrendered life to Jesus Christ. So I've been walking with Jesus now for 37 years and really had a transformative experience. But my upbringing was pretty chaotic in that I had men. Uh, like a babysitter, friend of the family, friend of a next door neighbor, different men in my life at 6, 10, 11 that sexually molested me as a boy at those ages. And so that brought in a lot of distortion. So by the time I entered into puberty, I was doubting my own sexuality and gender and identity. And unfortunately, I had somebody who was watching me, a guy that was a few years older, and saw that I had gone into this kind of this funk of depression. And he was saying to me, he knew what the problem was. And I was saying, no, you don't. And long story short, he introduced me to the gay community in Oklahoma City. I didn't even know there was such a thing. I was raised in Catholic parochial school.
Mm,
And so I was a bit naive. And of course, that was in the 70s.
mm,
And, we did have a gay community, not as like it is today, out, proud, and, quote unquote, thriving. Um, back in those days, it was kind of hidden in Oklahoma City. So only if you were really searching for it and knew where to look. So I had this radical transformative experience. I lived gay identified for 8 years. In my most formative years of development, the APA would say it's impossible for someone like me to even exist, that an orientation change, desires can shift, and yet that has taken place in my life. What happened is my little brother died on Mother's Day on 1981, and that set me into a whirlwind of wanting to know about eternity. And I actually started crying out to God for about 1.5 years. And I wanted to know about who goes to heaven, who goes to hell. You know, I had enough information in parochial school that I believed those things. Well, what happened is I was literally in a house with people having partied with a girlfriend. And in this house on a Sunday afternoon, on February 6, 1983, these people were communicating like they really knew Jesus, like Jesus was coming and going from their house, like Jesus talked to them and was praying, that when they would pray, he would answer their prayers. And I was thinking in my mind, man, these people are crazy. I don't even know what they're talking about. And all of a sudden, while I was sitting there listening to their conversation, this presence came over me. My heart started pounding, and I heard this voice in my head said, if you do not accept me tonight, you're going to die. Well, Dr. Mike, that happened in 1983.
Wow.
In 1983, we heard about a mysterious disease that summer popping up in all the hospitals in Oklahoma City. Now, when people look back on the history, they're surprised to find out that there was something back then labeled GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, and it was called the gay disease. And the Lord that night on February 6, 1983, saved me out of a pit, out of a horrible pit. I cried out to him and he heard me, and he sent his word to heal me. Psalms 107, verse 20. And the reason why that's so important is because on my way home that night, my friend asked me, well, does this mean you're not going to be gay anymore? And I said, I don't know. My parents' priest is telling me, it's all the more reason to come to mass, wink, wink. He's trying to seduce me. I found out there's all these gay ministers. And I said, I guess it has whatever Jesus has for me. But I went home and got the big Douay version of the Bible, blew the dust off of it, lugged it into my room, prayed over this Bible. And Mike, when I prayed over it and asked the Lord for the answer, I literally flipped that thing open. It fell to Leviticus, and I saw it had a title on the top. It says Laws on Sexual Immorality. And my eyes fell down on verse 22. And what the gay priest had told me wasn't in the Bible and that it didn't matter. I was reading it in black and white. And so I knew for sure that my life was a sinful lifestyle. And I knelt down beside my bed that night, and this is miraculous. And Jesus set me free in that I did not go back and act out anymore. Now, I had a lot of work to do in my soul, but Jesus set me free. And I spent the next 3 years in discipleship care and counseling and help. And then I got married in 1986 to my wife, Robin. And I've been doing really ministry on and off in those early years ever since, and now for almost the last 30 years full-time in ministry.
Yes. Wow. What a fantastic story of deliverance and redemption. And I've got to tell you something, Stephen. I really appreciate you saying that as you were praying and you opened the Bible and boom, there it was, Leviticus, and your eyes fell right on that verse. Listen, folks, I have heard that similar testimony from a number of people over the years that have been wrestling with something. They've been given false information by someone else, and the Lord supernaturally, that's the only way that you can describe it, is that the Lord supernaturally intervened and said, no, my son or my daughter, here's the truth. Here's the truth of it. And so your eyes fell right on that spot. That's amazing testimony, Stephen.
Thank you. It's the Lord. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Well, one of the things that concerns me today um, is the ministries that have historically been focused on assisting the sexually broken leave those lifestyles, whether it's lesbianism or homosexuality. But Stephen, I also see some of those ministries are compromising today. Some of them have backtracked now, and they're beginning to do the unthinkable, in my view, which is apologize for the alleged harm or damage that they've done in trying to rescue and assist in the deliverance of people from this sexual brokenness. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I actually know quite a bit about that, in that I know firsthand the Exodus International North America situation as the chairman of the Ministry Council, a disempowered advisory board to the board of directors. Alan Chambers and his pastor, Clark Whitten, began this narrative in all the way back in 2008, that things like 1 John 1:9 really isn't written to Christians. It's a waste of time for you to confess your sin. And so there was this really what we call in theological circles antinomianism, or what is plainly described as a hyper grace, which
Yeah.
for listeners, it's just a grace, kind of like the Nicolaitans and Revelation. It doesn't really matter what you do in your body. Grace covers everything, and God will forgive you, and you can just live however you want. But you look at Jude epistle, verse 4, and you can plainly see that they're the ones that creep in unnoticed. They turn the grace of God into lewdness or lasciviousness. And then what ended up happening is in 2010, you have the Mark Yarhouse white paper that was being actually commissioned by D.A. Carson, that underscored that orientation doesn't really change. Well, you got that, Mary, by the time of January of 2012, this information coming in. So Alan announces in January of 2012 that nobody can change, or he says 99.9%. Now he jokes about it and says 99.999999999%. And I'm like, wow, Alan, you have proceeded from bad to worse. And
Yeah.
so that's the history behind the Exodus fall. And unfortunately, he had changed the bylaws through a systematic place where all the Exodus ministry leadership were also disempowered from authority legally, and the board became an Alan Chambers ministry. And so that's how Alan was able to hijack Exodus and it become a ministry of Alan Chambers rather than a network of ministries. And he subsequently, by the time April rolled around, many of the more mature ministries and myself, one of the founders of the Restored Hope Network, we broke away. I'm no longer the chairman. Term limits. After 7 years, I termed in June of last year. So, and I'm not on the board. But we love the Restored Hope Network. We bless their work, but we are no longer associated with it right now. And we're feeling like the Lord is leading us a different way. But those ministries have always proclaimed a biblical orthodox view, and the idea that people have fallen away and all the ministry has gone away is not true. Most of these ministries have been around for over 30 years, and the more mature ones. And so when Alan goes around proclaiming that, it's just not even the truth. He's got an skewed a misrepresentation. And now you have this coming out of the Southern Baptists and
Yes.
the Presbyterian Church, which is called Revoice or Revoicing, the
Yes.
idea of bringing a narrative that you can be gay and celibate, what actually came out of the Gay Christian Network Side B. And so you can take on a total corrupt identity and unnatural affections as long as you don't, act on it as celibates. And they're promoting this idea, which is actually heretical, and it really slams against the words of Jesus in many places. I like to use Timothy's words, Paul to Timothy, that says, if your gospel is not met with the sound words of Jesus conforming you to godliness, you have a different gospel.
Amen.
And that's what they're promoting, is they're promoting a different gospel, one that grace isn't necessary to change or grace is powerless to change. So like the other words of Paul to Timothy, they have a form of godliness in 2 Timothy chapter 3. They have a form of godliness, but they deny the power. And so they're leaving people stuck. And now we're seeing lots of people fall back. And now you've got the vice president of Exodus who has now even gone back into homosexuality, along with several other leaders. So that's kind of the state we're in. Gay Christianity, LGBTQ is coming into the church, and even those in the Gospel Coalition, the Southern Baptists, the Presbyterian Church of America are embracing this narrative. That's where we're at today.
Yes, you're absolutely spot on, Stephen. Not that you need my confirmation, but everything that Stephen just stated in kind of drawing a timeline and showing you what's happening today is absolutely spot on. Stephen, one of the things that people say today, and it's nothing new, it's been around for a few years now, is that homosexuality is biological. And you already made this statement. They say, hey, you can't change. Orientation is not changeable. You are who you are. And when someone makes that statement or tries to defend that position, how would you approach that, and how would you respond to that?
Well, several ways. First, biology 101, and the science is on our side now.
Yes.
With the mapping of the human genome, the DNA conclusively shows there is no gay gene. There is no predetermined genetic disposition to homosexuality. Nada. It's not there. Okay. Now, there's still some studies out on hormonal release within the brain in utero during brain development. But even if that's true, like I've said for years, even before the DNA results, is even if they were to find a recessive gene, it doesn't matter. God's word is still true. And we have so many other physical anomalies and distortions of sickness and disease and brokenness that is out of God's norm and divine intention. Well, when biology 101 is looked at, it's very clear that homosexual behavior is egregious, and it is extremely detrimental. Male homosexuality is very destructive, but a lot of what is not talked about is the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. They clearly show that in female homosexuality, there's a way higher disproportionate factor of mental illness and emotional anxiety problems. Well, I think it's indicative of the way that God has made male and female, in that men, typically speaking, are more sexual, women are more relational and emotional. And so the complement of that actually shows us Imago Dei. Now, we live in a fallen world. So because we live in a fallen world, we're going to have all kinds of sin and brokenness, and certainly people that feel like they can't stop their behavior or their attractions. But my experience in 30 years of pastoral care is that when the hard work is done and you look at resolving the traumas, the underlying issues of defensive detachment, or walling off from the same-sex parent, the identity conflicts that come with how you view yourself in light of your own gender, the insecurities and the fears that happen through childhood sexual molestation in both males and females. When you start unpacking all of this, people start finding freedom and people start finding healing. So that's how I respond. And we sit here and we talk to lots and lots of families in pastoral care and counseling. We run parent support groups. And so we address this issue all the time.
Yes, yes. And Stephen, you recently released the results of a detailed study. I'm showing it right now, titled "The Complete First Stone Ministries Effectiveness Survey Report." The question, folks, that was asked is, freedom from homosexuality truly possible? The answer is a resounding yes. Yes, it is. And so, Stephen, I wonder if you'd give us a little background on this survey and the data that you collected and what it revealed.
Yeah, they can go to freedomrealized.org and they can see fact sheets and they can see quotes. But over in that particular report, which is actually just as expensive as the book has a lot of information. Freedom Realized, it has the red cover and it's smaller. It does have the report in it, but it's truncated as far as extra charts and all the comment. It's in grayscale. That report that you held up is all in color. The charts are in color.
Yes.
It's large and it can be used for somebody who actually wants to use, who they want to use the information.
Yeah.
And so that's why we published it in both ways. Now, the bottom line results is 92 to 93% of the people that originally came to us were sexually broken. They felt like their sexuality was out of control. And after they spent at least 1 year of discipleship care and support group, the numbers were remarkable. I was actually, Dr. Mike, surprised. When the survey results came back, I thought, if we get 55%, we'll be doing great, right?
Yeah.
Well, they came back 72 and 73% felt like that they were either completely free or were, almost free of any form of, connection to their former life of sexual addiction. That to me is remarkable. No one has those kind of results out there in the secular world. And yet, through the gospel of Jesus Christ, we see this repeated in ministries like ours over and over and over.
Yes. And let me repeat that again, folks. I don't want you to miss this. This is from the survey, by the way. Survey, the Complete First Stone Ministries Effectiveness Survey Report. 88 to 92% of folks before coming to First Stone's ministry who identified themselves as sexually broken and considered themselves sexually addicted, after being and participating in First Stone's ministry for a year, 72 to 73% considered themselves free from sexual sin and brokenness. That is an amazing number. That's an amazing percentage, Stephen. What do you, and I know what you're going to say, it is the Lord working through his word and his truth and the compassion of his people. What do you attribute that to? I mean, I know you have a dedicated staff. You're dedicated to this as well, but what else?
Well, the people did the hard work that was necessary of the ones that answered. Of course, if anybody goes and sees the survey, we didn't hold back on the 5 to 10% that said you're out to lunch and we love our homosexuality. All the comments are in there.
Yes.
700, over 700 positive comments. And I think there was like 30 or 40, pretty, we hate you type comments.
Yes.
We didn't hold back on any of those comments. And what we attribute to is also skillfully knowing how to help people overcome their trauma, the need for prayer and inner healing. And honestly, and I know I get ridiculed a lot for saying this, but I have to agree with the Bible that Ephesians 6, verse 12 says, our wrestle's not against flesh and blood. So there is a much needed understanding that the brain, the mind, is the war zone, and demonic activity is real, and the oppression of Satan and the lies that come into the soul can be extremely difficult to overcome, but certainly not impossible. And here's the other thing, Dr. Mike. This is what they mocked me. Even the pastor of the PCA church that hosted Revoice last year mocked me in his workshop. Several people sent me his information that said that I was basically a liar. Well, the reality is how can I be lying? This is a survey, and it's just the results of it published.
Right.
It's like, there's no lie. Look at the hard numbers yourself, Now, he can beg to differ on my conclusions and the conclusion of statisticians that naturally work the numbers out by the population of the United States, what this means. Well, this naturally means you've got tens of thousands of people that have left homosexuality, and nobody wants to talk about it. And if you're the one that brings it up, you become a liar. And that's what's going on with this entire report.
And Stephen, I just have to say how heartbreaking. I mean, I'm familiar with what you just said, those that are advocating for great gay Christianity and so on. But how heartbreaking is that when pastors whose first allegiance is supposed to be to the Lord, and to rightly dividing the word, and to speaking the truth, the only truth that matters, which is God's truth, turn their back on that and cloak that, what they're doing, in compassionate Christianity. That just breaks my heart to hear that. I know that it's happening increasingly, as you've already said. And by the way, folks, Stephen, again, just to prove his point, I read some of the comments, some of the negative comments, some of the no comments today. He put everything in here. Yes, we were helped. Thank you for everything that you've done for us. No, you guys need to repent. And I mean, it was the whole spectrum. But praise God, those that had a negative response, very small percentage. So what that tells me is this is a very impactful ministry. First Stone Ministries, folks. Go to the website. Can they buy the books there on your website?
Yes, that's correct.
Stephen? Okay.
Firststone.org.
Okay, so firststone.org, and get the books, get the survey. Perhaps you know somebody, you have a family member, sister, brother, niece, nephew that is struggling with this. You need to help them. These would be some good resources to equip yourself. Kathy, we're going to take some questions when we come back from our sponsor break. And folks in the huddle, if you have any questions for Stephen, then get those ready, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Healthy living through LifeVantage. Scientific research has validated oxidative stress as the root cause of aging and most disease. Oxidative stress is the result of the production of free radicals at the cellular level that damage our bodies. Protandim reduces free radical damage by 40% in 30 days. It does this by triggering the body's intelligence, activating the NRF2 protein, which in turn produces its own powerful protective antioxidant enzymes. LifeVantage Protandim, NRF1 and NRF2 work together to enable your body to rejuvenate itself on a massive scale, whether by upregulating your genes' ability to produce their own antioxidants, your cell's ability to produce mitochondria, or your digestive system's ability to regulate bacteria. We're helping you stay on top of the aging process while delivering the mental clarity and overall well-being you need every day to get the absolute most of your life. More information is available at www.abcgotit.com/MIKA68. www.abcgotit.com/MIKA68.
Hi friends, Works LLC is a manufacturer of custom-made holsters, mag carriers, knife sheaths, and accessories. Works is your one-stop shop for high-quality inside or outside the waistband concealed carry holster. Works LLC is a Christian and family-owned and operated company that values made in the USA. Visit Works LLC, www.werkz.com, works.com, Works LLC, 855-937-5901, 855-937-5901, Works LLC.
This is Dr. John Diamond with Peacemakers Outreach. I would like to personally invite you, your friends, and church families to the first annual Faith and Freedom Conference that's being held at the Edinboro Camp and Conference Grounds on September 28th. Our lineup includes a group of the strongest Christ-centered American patriots ever brought to Western Pennsylvania.
The Faith and Freedom Conference in Edinboro features moderator Dr. Mike Spalding of Soaring Eagle Radio, Fran Reese, president of Salt and Lake Council, nationally known speakers and authors William Federer and Matt Truella, Ann Fisher, a leader of the Modern Black Robe Regiment, Rusty Thomas of Operation Save America, syndicated radio host Bradley Dean of Sons of Liberty Radio, and Coach Dave Dobbenmeyer of Past the Salt Ministries.
It's the Faith and Freedom Conference in Edinboro, September 28th. For tickets and information, go to faithandfreedomconference.com. That's faithandfreedomconference.com. Faith and freedom. You can't have one without the other.
Hey folks, thanks for supporting our sponsors. And I do also want to call your attention. You saw the conference promotion playing September the 28th in Edinboro, Pennsylvania, the Faith and Freedom Conference. It's going to be a lot of fantastic speakers. Coach Dave will be there. Bradley Dean will be there. Matt Truella will be there. Bill Federer will be there. And I know I'm going to miss somebody. I get the honor of emceeing the event. How about that? So you go to Faith and Freedom Conference website. I think it's faithandfreedomconference.com. And you can register for that conference. It's a one-day conference, Saturday, September the 28th. Okay, we're going to go to questions now. And Kathy, you have one from someone on social media.
I do, from Facebook. Someone is asking, if it's not biology, then why are people gay? Is it all related to demonic influence?
Great question. No, it is not all demonic, and that it is conclusively, even good psychologists will tell you that that the reality is about the nurturing environments by which people are raised. One of the things I teach and I talk about in the Freedom Realized book, the full book, that has the red cover, is an overview of homosexuality and the emphasis of perception based upon a person's personality, temperament, and their giftings. So you've got like the male who may be the sensitive, emotional, artistic, and a non-developmental issue or what we call arrested emotional development and not being able to connect with the same-sex parent. That is very consistent in what we see with people who struggle with same-sex attraction or their own identity conflict. It begins early in age. Also in female homosexuality, you have these girls that are more assertive. Their temperament, their personality isn't quite as emotional as other girls, or they like things that, they're labeled a tomboy. And so both of these children actually need to see the safety in the good of their own gender. So the sensitive male needs to see the safety in the what is the God-given what we call initiating qualities of the masculine, and females need to see the God-given responsiveness of the good of femininity. And so it's very important to understand that these two things are actually huge factors in most, I would say, high 90% of the people that we minister to. And even the results that came in, that we see that these people did struggle like that. And then the other factor is more than 55% were sexually molested prepubescent. So that cannot be, just put aside, because then when you ask about sexuality, what we call sexual distortions, that number goes all the way up to 95%. And so this idea that the drag queen story hours and all of this normalization of homosexuality, of LGBTQ history and understanding to elementary school is nothing more than the grooming of the next generation to have a lower tolerance of homosexuality. So it is conclusively a nurturing environment that brings about a questioning of one's own identity. And yes, sometimes it is based upon personality, temperament, and the need for really shoring up the security of who they are as gendered beings.
Yes, fantastic response. Thank you, Stephen. And folks, let me tell you something. Stephen just said about the normalization of the LGBTQ at Drag Queen Story Hour. That is exactly why Christians should be up in arms.
That's right.
And vocally and physically there saying, not in my town, not here, not today, not ever, because this is what you're doing and we're not going to permit it. Thank you for that response, Stephen. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Kathy, any other questions?
I do have another question.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Stephen, do you know if there's any laws that are currently being generated that would prohibit your ministry from doing its job?
Yes.
Do you know what they are?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's very important for people to know that right now in the House of Representatives at the federal level, it's already passed. It's called H.R. 5, House Resolution 5. It's a resolution. It's not an actual bill yet. But those who know how this works should know that this can be flipped into a bill very quickly. It had the support of, I think, every single Democrat and 8 Republicans. It's called the Equality Act. The other thing is this is now in the hands of the Senate. The majority leader of our Senate should be called Mitch McConnell, and Lindsey Graham, who is over the Senate House Judiciary Committee. It is S-788 on the Senate side. And this would literally make everything of LGBTQ behavior at the level of the amending the 1964, 68, 69 civil rights law. And so what that does is that makes all employment, all engagement of anything that deals with race and gender that LGBTQ would be equal to. And then in California, huge, they've already moved to pass in their House of Representatives, and I believe the full House, for what was a bill, I want to say it was 2943, maybe 2843, but it got pulled. And the same guy, Evan Lowe, out there in California now has authored ACR 99. And now this bill is even worse. What this bill would do is it would criminalize any kind of Christian speech, any kind of Christian communication, any documentaries, any books, anything, including, folks, that means this: the Bible. the Bible would be considered, like has been passed in Canada, our neighbors to the north, that you cannot proclaim the passages from the Bible that deal with the condemnation of homosexual behavior, because that is considered hate speech. So this is happening across our nation. Then you have these other bills that are called conversion therapy bans. And that is a ruse term thought up by the SPLC and the HRC. The SPLC is the Southern Poverty Law Center, the HRC, the Human Rights Commission, the biggest gay lobby in Washington, D.C. They've been brainstorming for years, along with former Exodus Vice President Randy Thomas, in how can they, start this methodical movement bringing about bans. Well, they've done it in, I believe, I want to say 15 to maybe 18 states where they have banned conversion therapy to minors. And we have a battle here in Oklahoma that Jason Dunnington is trying to propose, and it got thrown out last year, but now they're doing a quote unquote, I would say a pseudo study with all these gay activists and all pro-gay APA people that conversion therapy is terrible, so that they can bring to the Republicans, to the bleeding heart masses, that somehow this is a compassionate thing to do. And interesting, when you interview these people like Sam Brinton, who is SamBrintonHoax.com, you can go look at that. It's crazy. These people can't tell you who their therapists were. They can't name them. They can't name the locations. And so they just go and they testify at these hearings, and these Democrats all vote them in. And I've been to some of these hearings. The last one I was in Denver this year when they voted it in Denver, and their gay governor, passed the law. And so it's happening all over the nation.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Kathy, any more?
Pretty alarming.
It is alarming.
No, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Denny?
I think what I'll do, Pastor Mike, is if Stephen can stay on a little bit after the show, I can ask him a bunch of questions if you don't mind, if he's got a few minutes, because you said you had other things you wanted to do.
Yeah, you can ask some of your questions now, Denny. Go ahead.
Well, my first question I had was, you were at the First Stone Ministries, is that correct? And,
Correct. First Stone.
And how did that create? Is that affiliated with the church, or is it's its own thing? Do you have a facility? Who funds it? How's that come about?
First Stone was founded in 1976 as one of the first Exodus member ministries, with a mom and dad named Frank and Peg Rogers. They're passed away now. But they had a gay son. They went to the church, Assembly of God Church, actually, and said, we have a gay son. We need help. And they said, well, he's an abomination. There's nothing we can do. Well, during that day in the 70s, there were a lot of people coming out of the Jesus People movement and other things that were happening. And a lot of people were leaving homosexuality. And one of those people was Frank Worthen. And so they founded what was called Exodus International. Exodus really didn't get its charter until 1983. And First Stone was also a part of that. We changed our name from the Fishers of Men, and I think it was 83 or somewhere in the 80s. Frank and Peg changed it to First Stone, which is based out of the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 7. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And then later Jesus says, go and sin no more. So the idea of offering a pastoral care to help people to go and sin no more. So First Stone became a full-time service ministry of pastoral care and discipleship and public speaking and support group ministries in 1991. And I've been here since 1992. And we have offices in Oklahoma City in Midtown, just a little bit west of the downtown area. And we have several offices where we meet people in a small meeting room. And then for our larger support groups, we meet in church facilities. And we're primarily backed by individual donors. We do have about 12 churches that help us, but there should be over 100 churches. But that's been like pulling teeth. And now there's a lot of threat against anyone that would support our ministry.
Yeah, 'cause what we're trying to, I'm from Iowa, and so you're just basically in Oklahoma, and people, do they come to you from out of state?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've met with people literally either by Zoom internationally, and I've had people fly in, like I just did an intensive that's coming out in our newsletter with somebody from back east.
Because we're dealing with people, and what we're doing, we call ourselves Iowa Huddle, but we want to help anybody that's in sin that gets born again and gets delivered, whether it's alcohol, drugs, homosexuality, it doesn't matter. Sin is sin, correct? And we feel where the church has failed miserably is there's no discipleship. And you said yourself, what really struck my ear, when you got born again, it still took you 3 years. And I have come to the conclusion it's a 3-year discipleship that is required to help people get through wherever they're at, reprogramming their brain and everything.
That's very good, because in the Conquer series, they talk about men breaking addiction to pornography. I don't actually put a time limit on it, because some people, they have the back and forth.
Yeah.
You sow, you reap. But they say it's a 5-year process to actually rewrite the neural pathways in the brain to stop the addictive process from porn addiction. Well, how much more so with transgender or fetish behavior or homosexuality, which is unnatural? It's much more extreme. And so, yeah, I agree. I tell people most of the time when we meet with them, you better be planning on at least 1 year, if not several, depending on their circumstances. The 18-year-old who's same-sex attracted, his recovery, who's never acted out, will be much quicker than a man who's been living as a homosexual for 20 years.
Right. I have a gentleman that got born again in 2009. He had been gay for many, many, many years, and he comes down and meets with me every week. But it's just, this is very large and it's growing, as you know.
Yeah.
And but I just think that's the spirit of sin that's growing. So I'll shut up, but I would love to.
Well, Pastor Dennis, we also, another big offering that we do is to come in and do a weekend conference of discipleship in empowering the church. And Q&A panel discussions for families are one of the most beneficial things, because you have very varying levels of grace levels on people and how to process things. So we try to help families to eliminate regret, how to process, a gay identified loved one who's now married to their same gender. What do you do with grandchildren? What do you do with all different circumstances for the holidays? So lots and lots of lively Q&A. So we do that, and we do that with a firm foundation of a teaching time. And then we come back and do that. And it's been very helpful for churches.
I'll let Dr. Mike later on if he gives you my cell phone number, you can give me a call.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions in the huddle? Anybody'd like to ask Stephen a question? Any other questions come in, Kathy?
No, I haven't heard any, Mike.
Okay. Stephen, let's discuss the need. Denny touched on it. You touched on it. You used the word discipleship. Let's discuss mentoring and mentorship among men and how vitally important that is. And Don from the huddle threw this word out, and I think it's part and parcel with it: intimacy. Now, in our culture, because it's so sexualized, we automatically see that with sexual overtones, but that's not really what the word means. We're talking about intimacy. We're talking about sharing our lives together and being relational with one another. And this may be a news flash for folks that are listening and watching. Men need other men in their lives.
That's right.
They simply do. Stephen, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, that's right. And what we do a lot of times, I'll do like a timeline or a history on a person, and you start seeing very quickly, or this person I'm, sitting down with, they see very quickly the deficit that they had. Like I'll ask them, where's your best friend? Who are the men in your life that have really affected you? What's your relationship with your dad? And usually a high 90% of the men that I minister to that deal with homosexuality, well, and even men that deal with sexual addiction, heterosexually, is they have a poor history of mentorship, and there's no intimacy that's non-sexual, and so you've probably heard of the love languages, the 5 love languages. Physical touch is huge, especially with the sensitive and emotional artistic person. They need quality time, they need gift giving, they need acts of service, and they need encouraging words. So you have those 5 things as a part of the process of the development of mentoring and discipling people that has to be ongoing. And really you're addressing roots of fear, roots of insecurity. And I never put this together until I was in counseling, of course, many years ago. But in my first beginning, I had a really good inner healing pastoral counselor who also dealt with deliverance. And it was a lady by the name of Jerry McGee in Lindale, Texas. And she's still around. She's in her 80s, but she's an amazing woman of God. And she asked me this question. She said, honey, did you have any fear when you were growing up? And all of a sudden I didn't think about it until the sexual abuse made me terrified of locker rooms. And I thought, I don't want to be with other boys naked. So I did everything in my power to avoid gym and sports. And I don't even know how I was able to get through high school because it was a requirement. But I had other electives that, well, part of it was because I was pursuing engineering. And so I wasn't forced to be in those environments. But do you know, most of the men that have dealt with some form, even men that don't deal with homosexuality, but they've been molested, also deal with a lot of insecurities regarding their sexuality. And, it's thrown out there in guy world about urinal shyness and all that stuff. Well, there's roots behind that. What is that? It's fear. And it's fear because they've not had true healing and intimacy with their relationships. They've not recovered from their bitter root judgments with their fathers or their same-sex parent, women with their moms. And so this is huge, actually. This is a huge issue of discipleship that many in the church don't realize. I mean, I've literally had people crying in my office saying, they hit me over the head with the Bible trying to cast the homosexual demon out of me. And I'm like going, oh my goodness, people, really? You don't even know that this is about a father hunger issue, both in men and women. Women need their daddies to make them feel like they're safe in their femininity rather than that they're going to be somehow abused. So it's a huge issue, and it's a huge part of the recovery.
Yes, absolutely is. And it is something that, if there are any pastors that are watching, I would encourage you to become acquainted with First Stone Ministries and the resources that they have. These are things, Stephen, I say this often, and I'm going to say it again because I think it is apropos. Pastors should be teaching, preaching, whatever you call that, what you do on Sundays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whenever you meet, you should do it with the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in the other hand.
Yeah.
And you should be making application to the things that you are teaching from the scriptures. And it's so easy to do when it comes to this area, and how hungry men are for true discipleship.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing phenomena that I think, and I'd like your opinion on this, Stephen, that a lot of the church, not all the churches, but a lot of the church is missing completely. They're so focused on youth activities and children's ministries and all these programs, and they're right under their noses are men that need ministry and discipleship as well. Your thoughts?
I agree with you completely. Would underscore it all the time when we go and teach on this and what's needed. I was asked to do a Saturday morning teaching, and one of the questions was, how do we implement some things here in the church? Because we now have families that are dealing with this, and even teenagers and elementary school level kids. One young man coming home last week saying, "Mommy, I don't know if I'm a boy or a girl," crying because of what the teacher presented. And so, we got to be able to have a place where people can process this. And honestly, Dr. Mike, our parent, family, and friends support group is a grief group. These parents are really hurting with their prodigals. And the church needs to be dealing with that, because we've got 3 families right now just in the last 6 months that their children are transitioning, and here's a daughter going and getting her healthy, beautiful femininity in her breasts removed with a double mastectomy. And the mom is just, actually struggling with depression with seeing what is happening to her daughter. And the last time her daughter came over, she was growing facial hair. And it's just, it's the parents are it's like they're dying a slow death of 1,000 knives of insults, cutting them and cutting them and cutting them. And so they're really, really hurting. And so in many levels, the church needs to raise up and do a better job at doing pastoral care in all areas of this situation. And I saw you brought up the Drag Queen Story Hour. If people would just discern the picture of that little girl.
Yes.
That little girl dressed up, mommy obviously put her in the pride flag, and pride comes before destruction. And it's so sad, and looking in the face of the drag queens, when you snap the pictures of these children, where's the discernment that they're actually afraid? When I was growing up, back in the 60s, clowns were not allowed to do that. They were not allowed to come into the libraries because they said that clowns were too scary for the children. And now we have demonic looking drag queens with, blood-tipped horns, and half of their faces is skeleton and the other half is a white painted face. And they think this is okay. This is where we're at. So the church needs equipping on so many levels.
Yes, amen. I agree with that, Stephen. Where is the church? Folks, if you're listening to us, and by the way, I'm talking with Stephen Black. He is the author of Freedom Realized, and I would encourage you to go to his author website. There are a number of websites. So there, thank you, Jared. Freedom Realized, you can get the book there, freedomrealized.org. You can buy the book right there from Stephen's website, freedomrealized.org. And Stephen, is there an email that you could give for folks to contact you if they'd like to email?
Well, the problem with email is that we get a lot of hate emails. So we ask people to go to firststone.org and fill out the contact form. And we will respond within 2 business days.
There you go. So go to the website and use the contact form, folks. If you have questions.
Under the About tab.
Under the About tab. There you go.
Contact us. Yep.
Contact us. Perfect. Thank you so much, Jared. So if you have questions for Stephen, questions about the ministry, you'd like to schedule someone from the ministry, perhaps Stephen, to come do a workshop, you can contact them there. There is also a phone number for the ministry there. There are your office hours. Perfect. Beautiful. Get the book. You can also go to the author's website, stephenblack.org. stephenblack.org. and check out the book and the survey. If you're interested in this information, this is fantastic information, and everything from the survey is in. Every question that was asked, every answer that was given, it's all right here in the workbook. Fantastic information, Stephen. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today about this very, very important issue today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And folks, listen, renewing our minds is not an option. Let's get in the game. I'll see you next week. God bless you.